Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to this special webinar. I'm Marco Aguilar. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the National Wildlife Refuge Association. And before we get started, I just want to do some quick housekeeping matters. If everyone makes sure that everyone is muted, and for that, so we don't have any background noise. And then if you have any questions throughout the program or the webinar, please put them in the chat, and we'll go through them once the presentation is done for that. So, and also just by way of a reminder and just some internal, many of you who join us for our monthly webinars, we have a webinar in August, mentoring. September, we will have one on advocacy, and then in October, we will be going over the federal budgets, and dates will be announced shortly. So for what brings us together today, as many of you know, the association, the National Wildlife Refuge Association, is the leading voice advocating on behalf of the National Wildlife Refuge System. We do a lot of our advocacy in Washington, D.C., in the halls of Congress and the Senate, and with the administrations. But from time to time, we partner our advocacy, we partner with others to advocate for the refuge system. And that's sort of what brings us to here today. The association is supportive of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service 5-year campaign to develop programs and events that engage in a new generation of wildlife refuge stewards, advocates, and supporters for that. And so we were approached, we were pleased to say, yes, we can do this, and we'd love to do this. So I'm going to actually be pitching it to someone from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service who will be introducing all our presenters today. So without much further ado, I please give you Kristen Gilbert, who's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Kristen, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Marco, and probably seen many of you before, if I haven't met you. My name is Kristen Gilbert, and I lead the branch of Communications and Digital Services for the National Wildlife Refuge System at our headquarters office in Falls Church, Virginia. And I have been leading an effort since I've been in this position to rebrand the National Wildlife Refuge System to be more widely recognized and supported by a broader audience. And that has a whole bunch of different elements, all the way from kind of improving how we do communications campaigns and social media, modernizing our visual identity. And one particular element that I'm really excited to share today and go through is working with partners to figure out how we can improve acting as a whole system and grow support for the refuge system and individual field stations as a whole through coordinated marketing and collaborative philanthropy activities. And about 1.5 years ago, we, the Public Lands Alliance, also a national nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C., competed for a marketing and collaborative philanthropy agreement with us to kind of think about how we do some of these things. And the first year, the partnership was really just kind of building muscle memory and getting to know each other as partners and tooling around how we might do this. And now we're coming into the second year of the partnership, where we're really trying to focus on how do we grow that connection between our local friends groups and national initiatives. And the Public Lands Alliance is leading up a variety of task groups that involve both field stations and friends groups and national partners like NWRA and Corfa to help us kind of tool some of these things, particularly around developing program development and signature events and ways that we can do Jocelyn says this better, but friends raising and fundraising for the National Wildlife Refuge System as a whole, as well as individual field stations. And that's what we're here to talk to you about. Is we're developing a signature program or a signature event that has a number of different elements to it. And our team from the Public Lands Alliance, which includes Jocelyn Boss, who leads development, and Aaron LeBrake, who works carefully on all of this, all of our partnership with the National Wildlife Refuge System. We'll be talking about that. But before, we want to kind of give everybody an introduction or at least an overview of what we're planning for National Wildlife Refuge this week, which is always the second full week in October, and how we're planning to celebrate that. And Ashley Ann Perez Rivera, a digital media ranger on my team, is going to kick it off with that.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Ann Perez Rivera, and I work in headquarters with Kristen. And I'm here to talk to you all a little bit, or to kind of put into perspective this year's National Wildlife Refuge Week activities, which include Walk for the Wild. So as many of us know, National Wildlife Refuge Week is observed the second full week of October. And next slide, please. And in the past, Urban Wildlife Refuge Day was observed in September. So this year, or at least actually starting last year, we started to have Urban Wildlife Conservation Day. As many of you may have heard, or some of you may know, the Urban Wildlife Conservation Program is moving towards a more service-wide effort. So there's an interest to have this kind of still very much tied to refuges and some of the work that National Wildlife Refuges do, but also provide an opportunity to other internal U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service programs to participate in events and celebrating urban conservation or wildlife conservation in urban corridors. So Urban Wildlife Conservation this year directly precedes National Wildlife Refuge Week. So Urban Wildlife Conservation Day happens October 8th, and National Wildlife Refuge Week starts October 9th. So together, we're actually strategically enveloping or combining them both into one strategy. Next slide, please. So the way I think about it is this way, kind of visually. So events can fall, or celebrations can fall anywhere within these three bubbles. They can be Urban Wildlife Conservation Day events alone happening on a Saturday. They can be events that celebrate both Urban Wildlife Conservation Day and National Wildlife Refuge Week, or they can be Walk for the Wild events. So the way that they are all interrelated is that they happen between October 8th through the 15th. And Walk for the Wild is an element of Refuge Week. So we do recognize that there are some stations that may have other kinds of events that are not necessarily Walk for the Wild events, but Walk for the Wild is an opportunity to celebrate during Refuge Week, and PLA will be talking a little bit more about what that means. Next slide. Excuse me, I'm trying to hold in a sneeze. So this year for Refuge Week, we're going to be talking, the theme has been Let Nature Be Your Refuge. Join us on our mission to make sure that wildlife and humans thrive. Next slide. And what we've really been drawing from has been this idea of refuges being home to wildlife and home to people, or I'm sorry, home to wildlife and a home to be in nature for people. So thinking about wildlife and human thriving, and joining us on our mission to conserve and protect wildlife and restore habitat. So kind of combining all of that. And we know that in the past couple years, especially with the pandemic, we've all been kind of stuck at home, right? And we also know that nature has been a really great space to feel at home outdoors. So this all really culminates in this year's theme for National Wildlife Refuge Week, and Walk for the Wild is an element of that theme to join us on a mission to make sure that we thrive, that National Wildlife Refuges thrive. So next slide. So I'm going to kick it over to Erin and Jocelyn, who are going to talk a little bit more about Walk for the Wild. And later on, I'll touch a little bit more on the key messages and communication tools that are available.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Boss. I'm Director of Development for Public Lands Alliance. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you all a little bit about Walk for the Wild today. I'll start off just by talking about what is Walk for the Wild. Well, Walk for the Wild is an annual signature event for National Wildlife Refuges and their nonprofit partners, with the goal to encourage people to move in nature and raise funds for nonprofit organizations to support the National Wildlife Refuge system. The event corresponds with National Wildlife Refuge Week, observed annually the second week of October. Walk for the Wild engages and appeals to both national and local audiences. National Wildlife Refuges and their nonprofit partners will encourage people to walk, stroll, saunter, hike, prance, trot, amble, ramble, or roll a distance of 5K, which is 3.1 miles, in support of either their local national wildlife refuge or in their own communities. So ultimately, you know, what makes this different than other things associated with National Wildlife Refuge Week clearly is the focus on building capacity for friends organizations and that fundraising element, which is why Walk for the Wild is administered by Public Lands Alliance. Public Lands Alliance, as Kristen mentioned earlier, is the national strategic fundraising, and marketing partner of the National Wildlife Refuge System. And we're working with the National Wildlife Refuge System as part of a 5-year campaign to develop programs and events, including Walk for the Wild, that will help awaken a new generation of wildlife refuge stewards, advocates, and supporters.
I'm going to pop in here a little bit and kind of talk a little bit about the why or the intention behind Walk for the Wild. Walk for the Wild is really just one campaign strategy that we're implementing to kind of raise all boats through this concept of collaborative philanthropy. So we're really exploring, as Kristen said, you know, how do we think more system-wide, but in the realm of fundraising and capacity building. Through this concept of collaborative philanthropy. So our intention with Walk for the Wild and also other campaign activities as we continue to grow this campaign is really not to compete with friends groups for donors, but to figure out how do we fundraise together and how do we allocate money directly to nonprofit friends groups to amplify their work in support of refuges. Walk for the Wild really is the first implementation of this model, but will be the basis for future campaign activities like fundraising for programs and others. So we really want to understand how we can work better together as a system of nonprofit partners, with PLA really holding the place of amplifying the message of what's happening on the ground among national donors and sponsors to really support your work. So I hope that helped kind of explain why we're doing this kind of new model focused on fundraising and how that ties to the greater campaign.
Let's jump in to talk a little bit about the Walk for the Wild model. The Walk for the Wild model has been inspired by a successful and innovative community foundation fundraising model. And it works to establish an efficient fundraising opportunity that inspires greater giving and participation from donors. The sum is greater than its parts, sort of emphasis there. It also brings together nonprofits in a single, high-profile, collectively beneficial event. And nonprofits that participate in Walk for the Wild receive 100% of the gifts that donors designate for them, less processing fees, of course, but as well as matching grant funds, well, supplemental matching grant funds from Public Lands Alliance generated via the Amplifier Fund. There's a lot of benefits that come to this model or come with this model. It's a great opportunity for friends groups to raise unrestricted funds for organization. It's an opportunity to be part of an event that takes place on a national scale and brings greater awareness to the National Wildlife Refuge System and its need for funding and funding nationally and locally. Training and toolkits are provided for ease in planning and execution. PLA, the fundraising and event platform make administering the fundraising as simple as possible. Donor acknowledgements are all handled by the platform by PLA. And PLA will work to recruit amplifier funders to leverage greater giving to your participating team. This is a diagram that we've been sharing with folks to try to explain how the flow of things work. We're working on our side to recruit donors to contribute to the Amplifier Fund. The Amplifier Fund is not intended to necessarily be a one-to-one match. It will just all be dependent upon how much is raised. That said, everything that is raised for the Amplifier Fund will be ultimately distributed to the participating nonprofit partners at the close of the giving window. And then the individual teams that are comprised of the nonprofits that have applied and are accepted to participate, those teams will be, directing people to their team pages, encouraging them to give. The donations are to Public Lands Alliance as the recipient, but those funds are also allocated to support their respective teams. And so once those donations come in, PLA processes and administrates all those. And then ultimately at the close of the giving window, 100% of the donations that were allocated to your team, plus a share of amplifier funds, will all go back to your participating nonprofit. To date, we have raised $5,500 for the amplifier fund. We have a lot of asks in the pipeline, and I remain optimistic that we will build that fund up, but this is the formative year of this. And so it'll be a tougher sell this year to build that up, but we're really optimistic that we'll be able to gain some good traction here in the next month, especially as now we're in the process of accepting applications for teams. We have 14 teams currently that have applied and been accepted. We have, of the 5,500 raised for the amplifier fund, 5,000 is being contributed by PLA to help jumpstart that. And we have another individual donor who has pledged 500 or has given 500 for that. And we hope to see that increase as time goes forward. Team leaders, there's a team leader associated with every nonprofit team. Each team leader will be able to see the amount raised in real time for the amplifier fund, as well as what comes in to their own team's fundraising efforts. And also, of course, PLA will provide periodic updates to teams on various things related to Walk for the Wild, including the amplifier fund. Walk for the Wild, we were also working to create some swag. We have a sticker sponsor who will create and who will print and distribute stickers to all teams for those teams to use as giveaways for people who participate and that type of thing. And those will be completely free to participating teams. We'll also be having an online store, which will be posted on the main landing page of the online platform, where people can purchase shirts or a few other items, I think, and that those will be mailed directly to them. So it's completely optional, of course, but that way they'll be able to make those purchases themselves. And then teams that are participating can also purchase t-shirts if they want to provide them as a giveaway in a more bulk fashion. We just are letting people know that those orders must be placed by September 15th in order to receive those shirts prior to October 8th and National Wildlife Refuge Week.
All right, so want to kind of take I will say there's a full presentation. We have a website with information about Walk for the Wild, everything from infographics to the rules and regulations to videos that really introduce Walk for the Wild in more detail. So I just wanted to touch on a few of these slides, but did want to, we'll put in the chat a link to where you can find full presentations on some of these items. But basically when it comes to forming a Walk for the Wild team, you may think of a traditional kind of 5K walk where anyone can form a team and raise money for their cause. This is a little slightly different in the fact that teams are, what we're calling teams, are really the nonprofit partner and the wildlife refuge. So participants in Walk for the Wild, those who want to walk or move to benefit a refuge, won't be forming a team, but rather they will be joining your team to show their support of your work. So the key things that I wanted to mention is that You need to have a friends group or a nonprofit partner in order for a refuge to participate, because this is a fundraising event. So we need to make sure that there is a partner in that team that is able to administer the fundraising side of things. But at the same time, so for one refuge, you can have one nonprofit or friends group, but also one nonprofit could represent multiple refuges and various events. So I think a good example of that is Team Alaska. They have one team for all 16 refuges, and they will be, we're working with them to really share all the events that are happening at the various refuges, but they have one nonprofit partner that's forming a team to represent all of those. So if you have refuges close by and you want to team up and really work with one friends group or nonprofit partner to do that, that is completely possible, but one refuge has to have a nonprofit, at least one nonprofit partner, and you can't have more than one nonprofit partner per team. So we really need that friends group or that nonprofit partner to take a lead on forming that team. I'm happy to answer questions about that, because I know we've got a lot of questions about that in the past. So,
Erin, there was a question in the chat about what level of support is anticipated from the refuge side.
Yeah, so as you can see kind of in this graphic here, wildlife refuges at the bare minimum are asked to acknowledge the nonprofit's application to be a Walk for the Wild team. We just want to make sure that they're well aware that this is happening. And there are absolutely ways that the wildlife refuge or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff are going to be able to really promote and recruit event participants. So you'll be able to promote the event that's happening, and it's really on the nonprofit partner to promote the fundraising side. So we'll go a little bit later into the toolkits and what's provided, but there are different sections in the toolkits that say, you know, this is some language that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff could use, and here's some alternative language that the nonprofit could use that really promotes the fundraising aspect. And then if capacity allows, we absolutely think it would be great if wildlife refuges are able to support event planning or the execution of the actual Walk for the Wild event. If your team chooses to do something in person on the refuge, you know, I think it's natural to have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff available to help out with some of that execution. But there's multiple levels, and we'll kind of go into this a little later on the various ways that you can participate based on how much capacity you have to implement for this.
Hey, Erin, just to be clear too, for participants, the wider public, it is free to walk for the wild, correct? And then and participate in events that might be happening on refuges. There's just this separate platform and team structure that people will be able to encourage to donate, but it's free to participate.
Yeah, and I'll kind of scooch ahead to kind of talk about the events, and then I'll kind of jump back a little bit. But each team is required to run some kind of event, and the events must always be free. And so that is why, you know, we're able to allow the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service folks to really promote this, that there will be a free event, and the nonprofit partner are asking their participants to donate above and beyond registering for the free event. There are several different models, and I'm not going to go into extreme detail on this, but there's several different types of events that you could run as part of Walk for the Wild. If you were looking to have a kind of lower capacity event, you could really look at this exclusively virtual or even a self-guided option. But if you are running an exclusively virtual event, and that means you have people walking in their own community in support of your team, there's nothing necessarily happening at your refuge. This is great if, you know, the weather's not great at your refuge in October, but people still want to support you and walk on your behalf. But regardless if it's virtual, we do ask that teams provide some sort of interpretation or guidance so that people who are walking your support are really connecting with your site. Alternatively, if you had the ability or wanted to do something a little higher capacity, but also have the opportunity to meet with members of your community as they're walking, you have the option of doing an on-site kind of coordinated event, or or even an offsite coordinated event if your refuge is not open to people, for example. And I think, you know, the benefit of these options are if your refuge is doing kind of a week-long thing for National Wildlife Refuge Week, or they have a fall festival or something going on, Walk for the Wilds could easily be an add-on where you're saying, you know, Saturday afternoon, we're going to do our walk as part of our National Wildlife Refuge Week activities, and you could kind of fold it into everything else that's happening. So it's really up to the team to determine which event model makes the most sense for them. And I will say, I think we have teams that are kind of across the board doing various models. So we'll provide some support there. But teams have to do some form of event and it has to be free. I'm going to zip back here a little bit because I did mention that I'm kind of using friends or nonprofit partners interchangeably. So nonprofit partners, as I mentioned, are the ones that will actually submit the application to form a team with their partner refuge to host a Walk for the Wild event and raise money for their site, programs, or organization. Nonprofit organizations with an official friends agreement has the ability to use the money raised for unrestricted needs, since your mission is directly tied to supporting the National Wildlife Refuge system. However, if you do not have a friends organization, or you have another nonprofit that you team up with, say, you know, like a youth corps group or an Audubon that helps out with environmental education programs, and you're looking for ways to raise money for a specific program, other nonprofit partners can partner up with a field site, but they must use the money for the programs or projects that they run or support in collaboration with that National Wildlife Refuge. And kind of the nonprofit partners need to be an official nonprofit with a 501c3 and has a cooperative agreement, or is a cooperating association, or really any kind of agreement to run programs or projects in collaboration with that field station. So we just want to make sure that there is some kind of direct tie to the work that you are doing together. But I hope that this accommodates people who might not have a friends group to still be able to participate. And then really quickly, just kind of a step-by-step kind of overview of what this looks like in order to form a team and to participate in Walk for the Wild. First step is to apply to be a Walk for the Wild team. As a reminder, the nonprofit partner is the one submitting that application, and then there's a separate form for the service staff from that refuge to kind of acknowledge that application, and they know that this is happening. And that deadline is fast approaching, August 19th, to submit those applications. Once your application is approved, you're really focusing on planning your events and outreach. We'll show you in just a minute kind of what that means to create a team page on the Walk for the Wild website, but that's really the focus. Once you are officially approved, you'll create your page, and then you will use the different tools that we'll provide in our toolkits to determine your event logistics, to advertise on your Walk for the Wild team page on that website. Step 3, starting September 1st, you're really going to be focusing on promoting and activating your community. So you want to promote the opportunity to join your team. As a reminder, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff, as well as the nonprofit partner, can promote that opportunity for people to register to participate in your Walk for the Wild event. And then nonprofits will additionally be promoting the opportunity to donate to your team via the team page on the Walk for the Wild website. And again, we will talk about that in just a little bit, but we're providing all the tools and templates that you'll need to do that promotion, to be able to post on social media or send newsletters to your contact lists. Step 4 is executing your event during National Wildlife Refuge Week. And step 5 is you'll receive that grant, including the money you raised plus your portion of the amplifier funds. That'll be distributed in November as a lump sum upfront check. So you'll get kind of 100% of your proceeds plus that amplifier fund, all upfront in one check in November after the giving period has ended. And next I'll pass it on to Jocelyn about what we keep saying your team page looks like.
Thanks, Erin. We are opting to use Classy as our online platform to power this year's event platform. Classy works with thousands of nonprofits, and it's designed to be intuitive, user-friendly. Nobody needs to be a graphic designer to put together these pages. It's really, intended to make this process easy and to accommodate all levels of comfort as far as, tech savviness and that kind of thing. We've been working with some of the teams already to help them develop their own team pages. On the slide here, on the top right half of the corner, there's, kind of what the landing page will look like. Obviously, this is all in draft form. The final version will be ready when it goes live on September 1st. Each team will have their own page. And that's where, when you're a team, you're going to really want to encourage and drive people to come visit your team page. And that's where you'll tell your story. You'll encourage people to participate in your specific events. And then that people will have the option to click donate, and that will be allocating their donation to your team. And so that will go towards your team's, established total fundraising goal. Each team, when they set up their page, is required to have a fundraising goal. There's no penalty per se if you don't reach that goal, but it is something that is required so that you can help measure your progress, and it helps motivate and engage people that way. And each team is responsible for having a team leader, meaning somebody who has the login information and is responsible for building the team page. And, that person is the person who is our main contact with PLA as we, need to communicate different things about deadlines, production, that type of thing. On the left side of the page.
Oh, Jocelyn, one more thing. Question in the chat. There we go. Ashley Ann answered, but I just want to make sure that it's clear for everybody. Hi, Anne-Marie. She asked how donations will be solicited from the public solely through the PLA online portal, Classy, or will nonprofit partners also be collecting donations on site? And because we're trying out this because there's lots of things related to on-site collection of donations on Refuge in particular, we're not having any donations collected on site for this first time around, just to figure out some of these things that have tinker with these other ways of doing things.
Right. And that's an important point too, that's why the team leaders it's important that the team leaders be a member of the nonprofit team, the nonprofit organization. And, obviously not a member of like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff. So that's, ultimately, why that requirement is in place, because there is that donation function. And then one thing I didn't touch upon earlier that I probably should mention is the fees. A lot of people ask about the fees. So how it works is when you make a donation, credit card fees. So every credit card transaction, there's a 30 cents fee that's taken out of the donation, as well as 2.2% for credit card processing, which is pretty standard. And then there's a 3% fee that goes to Classy. That's just part of the platform fees that go along with this. And so ultimately, we can expect between 5.2 to 5.5% per transaction. That said, it is structured so that donors, when they make their donation, they can add 5.5% to help cover the transaction fees. And so that means they'll just be making a larger donation so that you will get more of what they initially intended to give in the first place, or you will receive that amount, if that makes sense. I know that there's a lot of studies out there, and I think a lot of donors do opt to add that additional bump up on the transaction to help cover those fees. So certainly hope that that will be the case for this. I'll talk a little bit more about, as the team leader. As a team leader, you receive team notifications. So you get emails when someone makes a donation allocated to your team, and you're able to say thank you using the platform. It's meant to be engaging and to be very, very engaging with your audiences and to try to, you know, continue to engage people throughout the process. The platform opens on September 1st. September 1st means people will be able to make donations to the platform. You'll be able to promote your team pages, and certainly begin registering for different the different events that are being hosted by the different sites. That window, it will remain open. Donations will be able to be received up until October 21st, which is a week following October 15th. And then once October 21st hits, we will close that mechanism for, receiving donations. And that will be, when we'll be able to tally everything that's been received and then begin to, determine what everybody will be getting from the Amplifier Fund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just wanted to add, given the question we had earlier, we will have a separate landing page to promote Walk for the Wild, where U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service staff can promote and encourage people to participate without having a donate button on it. So we'll kind of have an intermediate page available for that, so that you guys can also participate. And I don't know if we mentioned this, but people will be registering to participate in your event also off of your team page. So they'll register by joining your team, as well as have the option to donate, all from that team page.
Right. And then, beginning on September 1st, obviously right now, team leaders, once you've been accepted, you're in as a team, you're able to see right now, like the platform, and you're able to see in real time, like where the fundraising stands for the Amplifier Fund. And then once the platform opens up to the public will be able to see in real time how much is in that Amplifier Fund too. So it'll be, it's completely transparent. Everything that you see on the platform, obviously minus the fees, and I think that's the one exception that comes out later, but everybody will be able to see what's going, what kind of activities taking place for the Amplifier Fund, as well as what's happening for the other teams if they want.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I think we're just going to pass it on to Ashley Ann here to kind of talk a little bit about the toolkits and resources that we're providing to the team, and then we'll kind of wrap things up and answer some more questions.
Thanks, Erin. So I see a lot of questions that have popped up in the chat, and I promise we're going to get to them. Some of them are relevant to what I'm going to be chatting or sharing a little bit right now, but keep putting the questions in the chat, because we'll definitely be addressing them towards the end. So we have a ton of toolkits and resources that we've been working on. And I want to give a special shout out to task force members. So if there's any friends groups or any Refuge staff or regional staff that's on the call today, we really appreciate the time that y'all have spent just giving us feedback and telling us what kind of resources would be useful as you're planning these events or as you're communicating about Refuge Week. All of the feedback that we've gotten from y'all and all of the information that I'm going to be sharing has been as directed and as informed by regional and field folks and friends groups. And I think the one person I saw on the name list was Sue Hicks. So special shout out to Sue Hicks, because I know you've been in like almost all of our meetings, so really appreciate it. So I'm going to be talking about the 3 toolkits that are available right now, and I'm going to go through what's in them. And then there are going to be additional toolkits and visual assets and tons of stuff that's going to be distributed by September 6th. So I would have loved to be able to distribute all of them at once, but due to capacity and also timing, we were trying to distribute as much as we could and what was needed at the forefront, and then kind of follow up with some of those more promo items. So I hope that's helpful to know. So next slide. I'm like thinking it's my computer. The National Wildlife Refuge Week Toolkit, as I explained earlier, Walk for the Wild is an element of Refuge Week. So we wanted to kind of all tie it together into these kind of overarching Refuge Week of key messages and goals. And so there is a National Wildlife Refuge Week Toolkit that's available for everyone doing any kind of event. And that includes some of our goals, our key messages, some of the key messages that I shared at the top of the presentation. It has social media hashtags. It also will have visual assets and some event guidance and tips and web resources. So next slide. So the purpose of our toolkits is really to provide consistent messaging and establish shared visual assets for National Wildlife Refuge Week /or Walk for the Wild. It serves as a one-stop shop for all information related to communicating about National Wildlife Refuge Week and events and any related material. So we know that I keep putting in the chat the more information link to the Public Lands Alliance. That's going to talk a lot more about how to apply to be a team, Walk for the Wild, the process. The toolkits are aimed to help you communicate about your event. So you need to start thinking about a post or something, or you're talking with a partner. Here's where you can kind of go grab some key messages, type the email up. We have sample language, sample newsletter language. So we have all of that available to you so that you don't have to start from scratch. So, and the goal is that because you have all of that messaging and all of that information there, that we're all kind of pulling from the same messaging and we're all kind of consistent and appearing as like one refuge system, even though it may be tailored just ever so slightly for your station or for your friends group. So next slide. The other thing about Refuge Week is that, or the toolkits is that before and during National Wildlife Refuge Week, we want to make sure, again, like I was saying earlier, copying and adapting the key messages. Share as much information as you can and share to the toolkit with fellow staff and nonprofit partners. In a bit, I'll provide the links to the toolkits in the chat. And I've also made kind of more a visual guide, and I'm in the process of making more like one-pager like stuff that you can kind of just send to a partner and say, hey, we have this, like, this is our Refuge Week key messages, like post about us or share with your networks. The goal is really to make it so that we have a place to start. Thanks, Erin. So like I said earlier, let nature be your refuge. Join us on our mission to make sure wildlife and humans thrive. This continues to be our kind of overarching theme for this year. Next slide. I really wanted to hone down those home messages. It makes me really happy because I think it makes me how I connect with refuges. But next slide. So these are our hashtags for the week. So our daily themes for each Refuge Week day, including Saturday, October 8th, which is Urban Wildlife Conservation Day. Again, remember that I shared earlier that we're strategically enveloping all of this into one strategy. So we appear clear and consistent, and the public, when they interact with us as the Fish and Wildlife Service, as National Wildlife Refuge System, as refuges. So these are our kind of shared messages and our key messages. Again, like I shared earlier, we're tying that theme back to joining us on our mission to thrive and refuges being home for wildlife to thrive, home and nature that helps us thrive. So these are our daily themes for social media. Next slide. And we also have in our toolkits web resources. So those evergreen kind of stories that you can pull from anyone, that these are applicable for everyone that has accessible trails. You want to share a link to accessible trails nationwide. Here's a link. Here's a link to the events page. Promotion right now. If you have a refuge station, please make sure that you're putting in your Refuge Week, your Urban Wildlife Conservation Day events on Drupal. And I will try to pop that link into the chat for you because that's very important. We're going to be querying some of that data. That's how we're going to be knowing what events are happening. And that's how the public also can know what events are happening at your refuge. Of course, I know that sometimes we also cross-post on partner sites and stuff, but now that we have Drupal, let's use that feature. So definitely that events page is going to be really helpful. Next slide. So the Walk for the Wild toolkit is going to be ever so slightly different because it's going to be kind of like a amplifying or supportive of the National Wildlife Refuge Week toolkit. So next slide. The Walk for the Wild toolkit also has some specific goals and key messages just for Walk for the Wild. So yes, the goals and key messages for Refuge Week still apply for Walk for the Wild, but the goals and key messages for Walk for the Wild are specific to kind of getting outside, moving outside, similar to some of the stuff that you may have seen last year. Similarly, we have social media and visual assets available. I'm sure that y'all have seen that beautiful logo that has been in like all of our slides that says Walk for the Wild. Those kinds of visual assets would be available on that on that visual assets toolkit. And earlier, excuse me, earlier, Erin and Jocelyn were mentioning fundraising tips and tactics. And to that question that Anne Marie asked about donations and you can do them, what you can do them, how to do them, all of that is going to be in our toolkit. And the way I try to recommend people use the toolkit is that the toolkits are very long. They're Word documents, and we're in the process of possibly doing like a combo Word, combo PDF vibe, but they're very long. So if you're in the process of planning your event, you go to the event section, event logistics and tips. If you're in the process of setting up your Walk for the Wild team page on Classy, going to that page and doing the Control F feature and just kind of searching your question in there. See if you can find the answer to your question in there. If you're in the process of planning your fundraising on site for those friends and for those friends groups and nonprofit partners, that's PLA has provided all those tips and all those tactics, and they're the ones actually that have worked on the whole Walk for the Wild toolkit. So they'll be able to, you'll be able to go on that section and kind of answer those questions and skim through and see where the tips are. So it is a very long toolkit, but the way that it's helpful or how you can use it is really by using that feature of going to the table of contents and finding which section applies to where you are in your process right now. So whether that's you're in the beginning steps of setting up your event, or whether that's you're working through your friends groups and figuring out where you can ask for money and where you can't. You're always, always, always welcome to follow back up with us and say, hey, y'all told me to look here, but it was not here. I could not find it. Always welcome to shoot any of us an email, because if it's not there, we definitely want to add it. But even if it is there, we'll be happy to help you and walk through and answer any questions, especially nuanced questions. So earlier, I also saw someone ask, I think it was Anne Marie too, that asked about, is there a toolkit that's different for each event? No, there isn't. So all of this applies to any kind of event, whether you're doing a virtual event, a in-person event, an off-site, on-site event. So it doesn't matter what type of event, all of these toolkits will be helpful for you. But what you may be thinking about is we're actually in the process of creating kind of an event, a supplementary event guide that gives people ideas and tips and tricks on like how to promote your event, how to do some cool outreach ideas, cool event type ideas. And our task force actually got together this past yesterday, feels like a month ago, but it was yesterday. And we walked through and went through tons of different event types, and we brainstormed and we put together this giant mural, which we're going to be using to create that guide that can be a starting place. So if you're a local group and you're trying to figure out like, what kind of event should I do? How do I add this to an existing event? This is a place that you can go like a handy dandy, like, let me see if I can get some ideas. So hopefully that helps answer your question, Anne Marie, but yeah, next slide.
Ashley Ann, we also had a question that I don't know if you guys are going to answer. And it was in the Classy slide. I think I'll just make sure Ted gets an answer. Ted asked, will Friends Nonprofits identification/brand be visible on the partners page, i.e. logos? And I think what Jocelyn showed that yes, you do have the opportunity as a team to put your Friends logo in there and it shows up.
Yes, I think Jocelyn shared kind of a template and oh, I almost missed that too. So in the previous slide, I'm sorry, there's a list there where it says how to set up your Walk for the Wild team page. So there are templates that Jocelyn and Erin created both on Classy, and then they put it as a document. So if you're someone that needs to kind of review what you want to put in the template first and then go on the site and put it in, there's that option too. So they're both in the toolkit, in the Walk for the Wild toolkit, and on the Classy sites, there's templates. So you can put in your own pictures, your own images from your wildlife refuge, your own Friends logo. So all of that is customizable. I think to Jocelyn's point, it is.
Uh-oh. We lost Ashley and she got me.
It's not at all like it's very customizable. You don't need to be a graphic designer. I hope I captured that.
I think we were just imagining you being very, very animated there. And you just hit your mute button, is that what?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what happened.
Can I shift to another question too that I think is really important to address? Colleen asked, last year's participants could choose any of the 560 plus refuges they wanted to walk for. This year so last year was our first time trying this event, and it was not a fundraising, foremost a fundraising event. It was kind of like, how can we get more people out to walk for refuges. And since we're doing such a large pivot where we're having friends kind of lead the, friends and lead this more fundraising type of thing, we're only doing these teams that apply and commit, friends groups and nonprofit partners that commit to apply to a team. And so that's how it will be situated. But I think, Jocelyn, correct me if I'm wrong too, like if somebody wants to donate to the whole National Wildlife Refuge System, their money can go into that amplifier fund and be distributed to the teams. But there will not be the opportunity. And I think in general, the money goes to like some of the great work we're doing more broadly from that. But the vision is in 5 years that we have more and more refuges participating in the Walk for the Wild signature event. But since we've kind of significantly retooled it, we want to start small and kind of grow it again. So that's the answer on that.
Yeah.
We're being restrictive on that.
Yeah, I want to add on to that a little bit too, Kristen. Last year's event, we had roughly around 2,400 participants, I think, nationally. And it was, there was an option to make a gift, and that gift went to Public Lands Alliance to support our work on behalf of National Wildlife Refuge initiatives. We generated a little over $2,000, I believe, last year through that effort. And all the funds that was generated through that last year, we have reapplied to building this year's model. And so we've used that funding to purchase this platform and to reinvest into making it more of a fundraising function. And so it's really, it's certainly, I'm sure, confusing for some who participated last year because it's a very different model this year. It is designed to be a fundraiser, and there's a lot of different requirements. It's not like select from any refuge on the menu and then just have an option to give $10. It's not working like that this year. So, it's certainly taken a little time to, get that messaging through. But, and also just in speaking big picture, it is something that we hope, the model that has inspired this is about 25 years old. And over the years, it just generates more and more momentum. It's designed to attract more nonprofits to participate. And in turn, by being able to say, we had X number of nonprofits representing X number of refuges, I think that's going to be a really big attractor to corporate support who will want to leverage gifts and encourage people that give $25 to feel more empowered, knowing that their gift will go further when it's leveraged through that greater support. This year, like I said, it's a little bit harder to sell because we don't have that history to build upon, but I'm so excited by the fact that we already have 14 teams, and I hope we get some more teams, and we'll be able to go to partners in the future and say, listen, we really hope you'll be a contributor to the Amplifier Fund, and then help leverage giving that is activated through the participating nonprofits.
I also want to mention that people don't feel like you have to participate this year. Yeah, I think there's going to be plenty of other stuff with that, what Ashley Ann shared with the communications around just general National Wildlife Refuge Week activities that you can just do, particularly if you don't, if your nonprofit partner might not be in the best place, or we've done this in just a few months. So it's a big lift to happen in a few months. And what's exciting is we'll start planning for next year as soon as this finishes and just giving us a bigger runtime. So don't feel like, just pick out what's going to work for you in the next couple months, because everybody's pretty overwhelmed. And we're just looking for how do we keep growing this slowly and building everybody at the same time. And I think we're getting close to we only have 7 minutes left. So I'm wondering if we need to open it up for questions, or Ashley Ann, I don't know how many more slides, but
yeah,
online stuff.
I don't have anything to add. There is on the link I shared, there's a recording. I just realized I get really excited. I speak really fast. So I promise in the recording, there's this similar information, if not the same. If you go on that link that's in the chat that says more information. Can you get it off to Aaron?
Yeah, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, but some important dates. August 19th is the deadline for applications for those nonprofits to submit their intent of having a Walk for the Wild team. And I did want to point out we are doing office hours every Wednesday. So if people have questions or are working on their event plan and things, they can join us. And again, the platform itself is going to go live on September 1st. So stuff will be reiterated if you choose to become a team. So I'm just going to move us forward into questions.
Erin, there was a question in the chat about the application form. Can you show the application form or share a link to the application form?
Yeah, that link that Ashley Ann has been sharing, and I'll put it in there again for you. That is where you access the application, and there's actually a video on that same page that goes through the application line by line and basically tells you exactly what you need to put in there. So hopefully, and it's a pretty quick application. It is done online. And there's opportunities to kind of change things based on what you put in there up until August 26th, I believe. So if you just get that information in there at the bare minimum so that we can get you approved and moving forward. Our intention is not to decline anybody. As long as you have kind of the bare minimum of a nonprofit partner, we'll work with you to get you up to speed and make sure that you can get a team together. So I think Ashley Ann just shared that link again. Awesome. That is where you'll access the application as well.
Great. I'll ask first question. How can small volunteer-driven organizations with little capacity participate in this event?
Yeah, I will say, you know, the whole model, and Jocelyn, I'll let you pop in here, but really the whole model of Walk for the Wild was generated to make sure that those small volunteer-driven, low-capacity organizations could do this. You know, we're providing the platform, or Public Lands Alliance is providing the platform that guides you. We're providing you a template on exactly what you need to say on your team page. You really just need to kind of customize it to tell your own story. We're providing all of the visual assets that you need. It's really just a process of kind of taking that template, customizing it for yourself. At the bare minimum, if you wanted to do an exclusively virtual event, for example, your obligations would be to create the messaging for that team page and get that online, promote that you want people to walk or donate in your support, and then using the visual assets and the templates and tools we provide you, create a few custom images or posts and stories about yourself that you can put in your newsletter, maybe post on social media, promote it as part of other things that you have going on throughout the fall. And that's really it. I mean, it really would only take, I imagine, you know, a few hours to pull together the kind of messaging that you needed and your team page. And then from there, all of the administration is handled by the Public Lands Alliance, and we're there to guide you the whole way. So that's really the intention of this event, is to make it really low capacity so you can add it to other things that you're doing. We know you're all planning events and doing things in the fall already. You can use it to kick off your end of the year giving, your annual funding, annual fundraising, and say, come kick off our annual fund and give us a donation to support us. So we have lots of resources and tips and tools on how you can do this at the bare minimum at a low capacity level.
Right. We have a question in the chat that was talking a little bit about, or a comment in the chat about the quick turnaround times. We completely understand that this is, you know, pretty close to the deadline. But this is, you know, being that this is the first time we're kind of rolling this way, we have had the application live since July 6th. It's just been, it's just been a process to get the word out and to really inform people how it works. And so we've, we're working on that process, and we'll certainly be better at it next year, I'm sure. And we'll have more people in the system to be able to better communicate that way and get that going. But certainly I totally can, acknowledge that it is a short turnaround time, and hopefully we can be a little bit, more in front of the deadline next year, especially maybe presenting via Corfa and WRA in the future on an earlier schedule as well.
Hey, Erin, do you mind putting up the slide with all the deadlines? Just, I think a couple folks have chatted me privately, I think.
There we go. And I'll put in the chat too, we do have a very campaign specific email list. So if you want to get kind of the first notification about Walk for the Wild information next year, or really just updates about how this bigger campaign is going, you can go to this website and there's a link to join the mailing list so that you're kind of the first to be notified. As Jocelyn said, you know, I feel like we've been kind of strengthening our muscles in terms of like, how do we get the word out, you know, among the different regional coordinators and kind of dispersing that information. And this has kind of been a good test for when we are working on the campaign, and really have learned a lot this year in terms of how to distribute information most effectively. So we hear you.
Okay, great. There is another one. Is there one single best contact for additional questions?
Yeah, we can put that in the list here. So you'll want to reach out to Jocelyn and myself. I'm putting both of our emails in here right now in the chat. This is also on that website. We've been kind of popping in the chat over and over again. So our contact information is here as well. You know, you can reach out to either one of us, but if you reach out to both of us at the same time, we'll be able to get back to you. One of us will get back to you pretty quickly.
Okay, great. Well, we're a little over time. I don't see any other questions. So Kristen, Ashley Ann, Jocelyn, Aaron, thank you very much for spending an hour with us this afternoon on a Friday to go over this. I see your emails in the chat. So if anyone has any other questions for them, please feel free to contact them. Or if you don't, and if this goes away and you don't have a chance, contact me and I'll put you in contact with them for that. So but thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, hosting us.
This was fun. I learned a lot for that. So, well, thank you very much. Have a good weekend, everyone, and we will be in touch.